Hi, everybody. My name's Irene. I think I've seen you all here before. Is there anybody who's new here today? I've got two screens of people to look at. Wave your hand if you're new today. Okay. So we're going to continue playing with the core ideas in Feldenkrais, and today we'll be working on something that makes it easier to lift and move your arms, and also should make it easier to roll over in bed for those who asked about that last week. And it's strange, what do arms and rolling over in bed have in common? And they have in common your sit bones. So Mira, could you kind of keep an eye on things, and if we're getting stray noises coming in, mute whoever is unmuted. So in the managed participants list, you can. Thank you. Okay, so let's have everybody stand up. So go ahead and stand up. And raise your arm in front of you. Just kind of lift it straight. And then put it down again. And do it again and notice, when does it get heavy? Like you're moving down here, you're moving in air, and you get to molasses. And just make a note in your brain about where that point is. Okay. And then raise your other arm, and where is it easy? And the other arm might get a little thicker sooner, or it might go further. Okay, good. Now, as you raise this arm, what else moves in your body? Do you shift your weight on your feet at all? Do you feel anything in your spine or your pelvis or your ribs? Okay. And this is the measurement move. We'll come back to this at the end and see what's different. Now, raise your arm out, straight out to the side. And how about that? Do you feel movement in other parts of you, or is the movement really just starting right here at the shoulder? Okay. And now imagine that you're putting away the dishes. You've just had a big virtual party, right? And you want to put those dishes up in the top part of your cupboard, and see what it's like to reach up there to push them in the cupboard. My mom was 4'10", and before cleaning up, she would take everything and throw it in the cupboards. And so at 4'10", everything was way up there. And try it with your other hand to like jam that thing in the cupboard. You want to hide it, see what it feels like in your body. Or both hands to put it up in the cupboard. Okay. And then while we're in standing, we're going to start the lesson in standing. And I want to have you touch your bones that we're going to be moving. So wake up your sternum and let your hands, the fingertips, you could either have pokey fingertips or flat fingertips. And use the flat fingertips and just let them sink through your skin and press down, and then you can feel where the ribs come into your sternum. And from the sternum, you can find the bottom of your rib cage, and you can feel your ribs going around to the side. And feel around to the back of the ribs. See if you can find your floating ribs. So there's the one that curves around that comes up to the front, and then on the side just below it, sometimes you can feel the point of the floating rib that goes back behind you, okay? And then on your right side, find the bottom rib that you can find there. And move your fingers up a rib at a time. And see how many ribs can you count there. And it's funny, some of them poke out more than others. Some of them are easier to come. I find if I come up in my armpit, I can feel more of the ribs. And there should be 10 of them, although it's not always, yes.
I'm sorry, we got a question asking, what is a floating rib?
Ah, okay, great question. So 10 of our ribs connect to our sternum in the front, and then 2 of the ribs don't connect to the sternum. So they connect, all 12 ribs connect to the spine on each side, but the bottom 2 don't come all the way around, and those are called the floating ribs. And the floating ribs, one of the main muscles that attaches to them is the diaphragm that's used for breathing. So having mobility in the floating ribs helps you be able to get a deep breath in. That's why all of today's newspapers were full of, for people who have the coronavirus, if you lie on your stomach, the floating ribs are freer to move, and it becomes easier for the lungs to expand into the back part of them. So those are the floaters. Okay. Then put your hand under the back of your skull and see if you can find where your top vertebrae is, the very top vertebrae in your spine. It's surprisingly high up there. If you nod your head a little bit, you can feel where that bend is in the back. And then most of us can't reach too far down, but you can usually find the knobby vertebrae. Most people can reach right there. And that is the bottom of your neck vertebrae and the top of your thoracic vertebrae. And if you take your fingers there and come around to the front, to the notch at the top of your sternum, that's the height of your first rib. It's like a necklace between the bump in the back and here. Okay. And then from your sternum, if you go out to the sides a little bit, you'll feel your collarbone that goes out to the very hard tip at the end of your shoulder. You could put one hand on your collarbone and shrug your shoulder. It's fun to feel the collarbone move. So to shrug your shoulder, your hand can hang down by your side and you're just lifting the shoulder up a little. Yeah, there you go. And feel how your collarbone moves in order to move your shoulder. This is a key part of what we're going to be playing with today, because the collarbone is the only place your arm is connected to the rest of your skeleton with a skeletal joint. So any movement of the arm has to move the collarbone. Find your other collarbone. And I like to put my fingers like a little scissors, one above it, one below the bone, so that when you shrug, you can feel that bone move. And if you rotate your thumb in and bring your shoulder forward, you'll feel that collarbone move forward. And if you hitchhike with your thumb and roll it behind you, your collarbone goes backward. So a few times, roll your thumb in and feel the collarbone come forward, and roll your thumb out and feel it go backward. Let's try that on the other side. So roll the thumb in and feel the collarbone move. When you can really get your fingers around it when your thumb's rolled in. When you roll your thumb backwards, everything flattens out a little in there. Okay. Now put your hands on the top of your pelvis. Let's see, I'm gonna just aim my camera down a little bit so I can stand closer. So your pelvis has these two wings, and if you put your fingers here, you can find the bones. It's the bones that your pants sit on. And if you trace that backwards, it kind of disappears into the fleshier part of our bottom, but those wings go all the way around to the back, and the pelvis comes down, and your sacrum is like a little triangle that sits in the back there. And if you go down a little bit further, you can find your sit bones. If you kind of reach under your bottom and push up a little bit, they're harder to find in standing. You might have to bend over a little bit forward and you can find your sit bones. We'll play with those in sitting. And then let's find where our hip joints are. So looking at the skeleton, our femurs come up our legs and then they make a right angle and they connect on the side of the pelvis. So the pelvis is angled like this, and then the hip bone sticks in from the side. I'm going to use my virtual hip bone. It kind of comes in at that angle, and then it bends to go down your leg. You can feel the greater trochanter, this thing that sticks out on the side of your hips. That's where your leg bones come the closest to the surface. But the hip itself is way deep inside the leg. Okay, so come and sit down. And in sitting, put your hand under and find one of your sit bones, just to wake it up. And you find the sit bone, and then move your body a little bit, wiggle, so that you kind of feel that sit bone moves when you wiggle, or you move around the sit bone. Okay. And then find your other sit bone. Sometimes one is easier to find than the other. Okay. And let's review the basic movements of the spine and the torso. So the spine can make a C shape. So if you look down and pull your belly in, see if you can make your spine do that sideways rounding. And put your hands on your pelvis like we were doing in standing, and feel how you can tip your pelvis backwards in order to look down. Feel how your sit bones almost come a little forward under you and your pelvis rolls a little backward. Good. Now use your hands and don't let your pelvis do that. And try and look down. And you'll see how it is just in your neck then. And then use your hands to guide your pelvis to tip. And then you get that whole lovely rounding. I've been thinking a lot in the last few days as I've been planning this class about what are the things that make us feel locked up? Because there's a sensation of I can't move my torso, I can't turn, sort of feeling rigid. And there are a a couple things that are the locks. And if we get good at using that part of our body, we can unlock ourselves. And the pelvis is really the core. So if you move the pelvis, the spine can move. But if you don't move the pelvis, that's the base of the spine, then the rest of the spine doesn't move so well. So now arch your back so that you're making this curve in the other direction. And to arch your back, push your belly out, spread your chest open. You could hitchhike with both hands a little bit, and then look up. And go back and forth a few times, rounding, letting your pelvis rock backwards. And then when you arch, tilt your pelvis forward, pushing your low belly out as you look up. So this movement can be initiated in a lot of different ways. You could initiate it with your sit bones, where your sit bones tilt you. See if you can grab the chair with your sit bones to tilt you a little forward or tilt you a little backward to tilt your pelvis. So it's almost like they have rubber on the bottom and they're grabbing the chair and rocking you forward and backward. Good. Now, the next basic movement of the spine is being able to curve it a little bit sideways. So to curve it sideways, let's start by tipping your head just a little bit. So tip your head to one side, and notice when you tip your head, does that shoulder lift up toward your ear, or does it go down? Do a little experiment to see what you do. Just to one side for now. You tip your head. And I'd like you to try, when you tip your head, lowering that shoulder. And the only way it can lower is if the ribs underneath move a little sideways. And to do that, your pelvis has to move a little sideways. So if I'm tipping my head to this side, I want my pelvis to move to the other side. And I'm going to shift my weight a little to the other side. And that shift of weight in the pelvis allows the spine and the ribs to compress on this side to get that curve. Now, if instead, when you tip your head, you lift your shoulder, it's really hard to get the ribs to compress on that side. So you've got to tip the head and lower the shoulder, and then shift your weight in your chair all the way onto one sit bone. Good. And come back to neutral. And let's try tipping our head the other way. So you tip your head a little bit and see, what does your shoulder do? Is it going up or is it going down? And invite it to go down by inviting the other one to lift up. So I tip my head and lift the shoulder I'm tipping away from. And then allow your weight to shift. So you can almost feel your sit bone kind of grabbing the chair and pulling you to the high side. Good. Now once, stay seated. Make your sit bones really firm on the chair. And don't let your torso move, and tip your head. And you'll see it's just a tiny little motion, and it might kind of not be so comfortable. And then take your whole torso and shift it over a couple inches, and then see how it gets easier to tip the head. So once again, it's our pelvis that's the lock. If the pelvis just sits there, you can't really move your head very well. But if you move yourself over, then your head can tip.
Irene, we got a comment
Okay.
in the chat that says, I can't get my weight under the shoulder pointing down.
So the weight should go under the shoulder that's pointing up. So the shoulder that's pointing down, you can lift that hip off the chair a little bit. So I have one side of my body that I'm tipping away from that's long. And then the side of my body that I'm tipping toward is the side that is the letter C. And we're going to keep playing with this because this is one of the hardest concepts, but it's the ribs as an accordion. So I'm squeezing my ribs on one side, which means they're getting long on this other side, and my weight is where they're long. Okay. The other movement of the spine that spines need to be able to do is to twist. So let's look over our shoulder. We've done this in a couple of lessons. And as you look over your shoulder, do it and come back. Don't hold it, just do it and come back. If you leave your pelvis still, you've got the lock on. And see how far you can go with you leaving the pelvis still. And then unlock the movement by sliding the sit bone on the side you're turning to backwards and sliding the other sit bone forward, and see how that unlocks the turn. As soon as the sit bones move in the chair, that's what lets one shoulder come forward. So as you turn, take one shoulder forward and one backward, as well as the sit bone. And then try it on the other side. So you unlock by moving one sit bone forward, one backward, and then you turn your spine, and then you turn your shoulders, and then you turn your head. Yeah. Just going to switch to the other screen so I can see the other folks. Okay. So with those motions of the body, things get easier in the arms. And we're going to increase the challenge a little bit. And for this next part, it would be great if you can go and get yourself a book, a hardback, preferably book, not too fat, no dictionaries, something maybe half an inch or an inch high, if you have such a thing handy. Okay, so what you're going to do with this book is take it and put it under one buttock. So you're going to be lopsided on your chair. You're just going to be sitting on the book with one part of your bottom. And we're going to take frequent breaks because this gets uncomfortable if you spend a lot of time crooked like that. So you put it under your bottom and then find a way to transfer your weight up onto the book. And experiment a little bit for how do you get yourself up there. Your other leg is going to have to push down into the floor to lift the other hip up off the chair so that you get all the way up onto the book. Some people find that the way that they usually do it. Another way of doing it is to take the hand on the book side and reach up as if there was a sky hook up there that you want to hook yourself onto. And to do that, the ribs underneath here spread out. And you'll find that as you reach for the hook or reach to put something in the cupboard, it lifts your other hip up so you get up like you're on the book. Okay? And then one more way is sometimes people take their sit bone on the book, and you can really feel it on the book, and you carve your sit bone into the book, and it tips your pelvis so you are up there. Good. Everybody take your book out for a moment. Take a rest. And just as you're resting there, see if that side feels a little different in the chair, a little more solid, a little more comfortable in the chair. You might notice your breathing, that the balloon inside you that expands as you breathe is a little bit squishier and easier to expand on one side than the other. Okay, so put the book on the same side again. And you can use all three of those techniques at the same time to get up on the book. You can push down with your leg to lift your hip. You can reach up, or if it's reaching up, you could just lift your shoulder up, and your sit bone can scoop. See if it's now getting a little easier to get all the way up over the book. And get up over the book and stay there. And while you're on that book like that, use your sit bone to pull you and make you go forward, and use the sit bone to make you go backwards. Good. Come down, take the book out. And see if one side of your body feels taller than the other. Like if somehow you were divided in half, if one side feels a little taller. And let's try that on the other side now. Put the book under your bottom. And do your own experimentation for the 3 ways to get up there. So you can push down with your other leg. And that, when you push down with the leg, it lifts your whole pelvis up. And if my cell phone was my pelvis, I lift up one corner, and that's what lifts me up onto the chair. Or I could use the corner down here to dig into the chair to tip my pelvis. This little tip of the pelvis, of being able to lift one corner of it, is the secret to walking and to balance. And like everything else, the unlocker is the pelvis. So use the sit bone, use your arm to really get way up and over this book.
And I think Sharon is saying that she can't get her weight under one shoulder pointing down.
No, that's an old one.
Oh, that's all right.
Is it getting easier, Sharon? So that scoop, and the trick is this thinking of your pelvis as a rectangle, like a table, and you lift up one corner, and that pours you up onto the book. If one sit bone doesn't lift off the chair, you can't get up there. All right, take the book out and rest for a moment. And then put the book back under. And use all 3 of those things to get yourself over there. The pushing down with your foot to lift the corner of your pelvis, the scooping of your sit bone, the lengthening the ribs on that side. And stay up on the book. And while you're there, use your sit bone and grab and go forward, and use your sit bone to push you backward. Good. Come down. And then this time, as you go up onto the book, turn your whole chest toward your leg a little bit. So it's like you're trying to take your belly and put it over your leg that's up on the book. Good. And you can sense how you do it, and you can, even as you look at your picture, as you go up on the book, everything shifts over. Your shoulders shift over, your ribs shift over. Okay, come on down and take out the book. Say thank you to the book. Okay. And now come back up to standing like we were at the beginning. And begin to reach as if you were putting something up in the cupboard. And as you do that, tilt your pelvis so that the shoulder on the other side goes down and the pelvis comes up. So you get very long on the side that you're pushing up into the cupboard. So all your weight can shift over onto the leg that's supporting that hand. And this only works when the pelvis does that little, let's see, if I'm lifting this side, I have to tip the pelvis to go up. So shift your weight to the arm that is up, to that side. Yeah, there you go. Good. And then try it on the other side. So you shift your weight onto that foot, and then you could reach and put something in there more easily in the arm. And if you look up at it, it makes it even a little easier. There you go. So you come back, and then it's this, yes, good, good, good. Okay? Now, to reach out to the side like we did before, do the same thing. Shift your weight onto the foot and then lift your arm and see if it lifts more comfortably. So you shift and lift. So your weight goes onto the side that you're lifting the arm. And then it begins to feel a little bit more like dancing because your ribs are coming along with the movement. Good. And to reach forward, as you reach forward, look up. Let your ribs in the front expand. Push your belly a little forward, and then the arm goes up. Okay. So now imagine you're painting the wall in front of you, and you have knees that can bend and eyes that go up and down watching what you're painting. Yeah. And it's like your arm hardly does any work because all the work is happening from your torso. Yeah, good. And now paint with your other hand. Feel the ribs expanding. Feel that C shape building. You've got a C shape on the other side. You're lengthening. And try a little horizontal painting.
Irene, Cindy is asking, what if one shoulder is rotated forward?
Your body is where it is. And so you have to do the best you can with the structure that you have. And when one shoulder is way rotated forward or one side is stuck short, it's going to be harder to do these. But hopefully by this thinking about the ribs moving, you can get a little bit more mobility despite the shoulder that's rolled forward. So try painting here, and it's almost, you could imagine your arm was paralyzed, and by shifting your weight from foot to foot, it takes the arm across for you. So there's no work in the arm. Yeah. And then let's paint a little sideways with the other arm. You could imagine painting over your whole computer screen, just like covering it with something. Yeah. And play and cover it with the other side. Okay. So the core of today's lesson is that it's all about the pelvis, and that it's the pelvis that unlocks the movements in the shoulders and the arms and the spine. And playing with the pelvis of being able to, so if this is the pelvis, being able to move it this way and this way, to tip it forward and backward, and then the rest of the movements in the body become easier. Come have a seat. And I'd like to open things up for a general discussion for a few minutes and hear some of the things that people said. Well, actually, in the beginning, you talked about ways that you have used what you've been learning in here during your daily life. I'd like to hear some comments about how you might use what you learned today in your daily life over the next few days.
Practice walking.
In walking, in walking, your pelvis is the core of what makes you walk. There's some wonderful videos on YouTube of a man who was born without legs. He, I think, was his mom had taken thalidomide, and so he was born with just little short legs. He walks by moving his pelvis. You can try this in your chair right now. Try walking yourself backward in your chair by lifting your pelvis and moving it back in the chair, sort of one side at a time walking. And feel all those movements of your ribs and torso as you do that. That's what's going to improve your walking, is getting the mobility in the torso and from the pelvis. Hey, somebody else.
Some of what you said good for getting out of bed.
For getting out of bed. In today's lesson, we played with using our bottom on what we're sitting on to get traction to move us. And so play with that just as you're sitting there, where your bottom gets traction and can move you forward or sideways or backwards, that your bottom gets that power. When you're lying on the bed, it's not your bottom that's touching the bed, it's your ribs. And you can try with your ribs to get traction on the bed to begin to roll you over from one side to a different position. Usually the easiest way for getting out of bed is you use that traction in your body. You grab the bed to roll yourself, swing your legs over, and then your body can lift up by the motions of your pelvis. So if we all tilt a little bit to the side, then think about your pelvis and try and bring the high side of your pelvis down to the chair, and it just pops you up. So if you were lying down on the bed with your feet hanging off, and then your pelvis pushes down toward the bed and tips, that's what gets you up to sitting. So do a little experimenting with that this week and see if those ideas help with getting in and out of bed.
Thanks.
Yeah, Ann Wood.
Question about last week and this weekend walking.
Mm-hmm.
So if I try to put one side of my pelvis forward, I find that does help with walking, but I'm not sure, since my opposite arm is supposed to be pointing to that knee, if that side of my rib should go, it tends to go back anyway. Is it supposed to be counter to your pelvis?
That is a great question. Our goal for good balance is what's called contralateral walking, and contra just means opposite. And so our shoulders are twisting one way while our hips are twisting the other way. And if you walk so that, let's all try this for a sec. Everybody stand up. And glue your arms to your sides. Just kind of glue everything together. And then to walk, bring your right foot forward and your right shoulder forward. And then bring your left foot and your left shoulder forward. That's what is called homolateral walking, where the same side is moving as a unit. And balance isn't very good when we do that. So we want to, as the right foot goes forward, take the right shoulder backward. And you feel this twistiness in your middle when you do that. So just come back to neutral for a moment. Take the right foot forward and the right shoulder backward. Okay, and then let's try with the left foot to put the left foot forward and the left shoulder backward. And come back. So take your left shoulder back and your left foot forward at the same time. It's this funny twisty feel. It's a lot like swimming the crawl. But that's where we're going with the walking. Does that help, Ann?
So right foot forward, right shoulder backwards.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Yeah, any other questions or thoughts of how you will apply this?
The arms. Feels natural, but I thought we were supposed to be doing the opposite.
So I'm gonna, right now we've got everybody unmuted, which makes it hard to know who's actually talking. So I'm gonna mute everybody and then raise your hand if you wanna say something and I'll unmute you. Okay, Al, let me unmute you. There you go.
What about dragging your feet, not coming down on a heel? How does the pelvis affect that?
So if your pelvis, let me just switch so I've got my window and I can make sure my hands are showing in the camera, which they were not. So if the pelvis stays very still when you're walking, you're going to drag your feet. In order to lift your feet, you have to tip your pelvis backward a little bit. So just as you're sitting in your chair, pull your belly in and tip your pelvis backward. Walking needs to have a tiny bit of that movement because when we do that, it's easy to lift your leg. So if you try lifting a leg as you roll your pelvis back like that, your leg will feel light to lift. If instead you roll your pelvis the other way and you emphasize the arch in your back, try lifting a leg. It just doesn't lift as high. So as we get your pelvis, each time you're here, you're getting more and more mobile with it. You'll begin to get that sense that in order to lift my leg, I have to roll the pelvis back and then my leg lifts and it doesn't drag. And then when you step down, you tip your pelvis the other way, and that's what gives you the sticking, like I'm on my foot and you feel solid. So it's this motion in walking that can help with the drag. And we will keep playing with that over the course of the lessons.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Anybody else want to say something? Rich, let me unmute you.
What about the use of arms with this? When you step forward, the arm swings back.
So I would say don't think about your arms, but think about your shoulders. Because if your shoulders are doing this little bit of rotation as you're walking, that's what makes the arms swing. Our arms don't swing just from here. Like we don't go like this when we're walking. That doesn't help your balance.
Okay,
So-
good point.
So yeah, shoulder opposite the hip on the same side. Jerry, do you have a question there? Or are you scratching your neck?
My neck.
Okay. All righty. So let's leave it there for today and go home and have fun playing with your pelvis in the next 2 days. And just any movement, if you find a movement being a little challenging as you start doing it, think, what could I do with my pelvis that will unlock me? But just think the pelvis is the key to unlocking all the movements in the body. All right, we'll see you again on Thursday. And I'm not sure yet what we're going to do, but it will be related to what we've been doing and take you into one more level of mobility in your body. Thank you. Thank you all for coming today.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.